Angel Reese just got traded to the Atlanta Dream, and something happened at the welcome press conference that nobody in that room was fully prepared for. One of her new teammates said something so cold and so pointed that the energy in that room shifted immediately into an uncomfortable silence that spoke louder than anything that followed. These are not critics from outside the organization. These are not rival players or media personalities with an agenda. These are the people she is supposed to share a locker room with, build chemistry with, and ultimately chase a championship alongside. And they already sound like the relationship started with serious tension before a single game has been played. Welcome back to Hoopzonic, where we cover the full picture, not just the press release version. We will get to exactly what was said at that press conference, but first, you need the complete context of everything that happened in Chicago before Reese walked into that Atlanta building with a smile. What exactly did the Dream sign up for here? Drop your honest assessment in the comments right now.
Now let's bring up the players. Introducing Ryan Howard, Alicia Gray, Naz Hillman, Brianna Jones, Jordan Canada, and Angel Reese.
Before the Atlanta chapter can be properly understood, the Chicago chapter needs to be told completely and honestly, because the situation that developed inside the Sky organization across 2 full professional seasons did not arrive suddenly or without warning signs that accumulated over time. It built gradually and consistently in one direction until the organization reached a point where continuing to manage it was no longer a viable option, regardless of the statistical production attached to the player at the center of it. The public version of events, the trades, the suspensions, the official statements delivered through carefully chosen language, represents only the surface of something that people inside that building experienced at a much more personal and much more damaging level for a sustained period of time. Understanding what those people went through is what makes the Atlanta press conference moment land with the weight that it carries.
Since they drafted Angel Reese, all of a sudden, the Bravado struggled to win games. And ESPN expects me to believe that the organization is the problem here? Either way, I don't think basketball had anything to do with why Angel Reese was traded. I think Angel Reese was traded because the Bravado thought that she was more trouble than she's worth.
Year 2 was supposed to represent the natural progression that comes when a young player and a franchise have a full season of shared experience to build on. The adjustment period was supposed to be behind them. The production was supposed to start translating into wins in a way that justified the investment the organization had made and the patience the fan base had extended. Instead, the Sky got worse, not marginally worse in the way that reflects normal, competitive variance across a long season, measurably and significantly worse in a direction that raised genuine questions about whether the presence of the centerpiece was helping or hurting the trajectory. The combined record across both of Reese's seasons in Chicago landed at 23 wins and 61 losses. 13 wins in year 1, followed by 10 wins in year 2. The arrow was pointed in the wrong direction the entire time, and it kept moving further in that direction rather than correcting towards something more competitive. The rebounding numbers that generated the loudest praise deserve an honest second look as well, because the full picture of how those totals were accumulated tells a more complicated story than the headline figure suggests. A meaningful portion of those boards came directly from Reese recovering her own missed attempts. She would miss a shot, secure the offensive rebound, potentially miss again, and every recovery registered identically in the box score to a hard-earned defensive rebound contested against a physical opponent. The dominant rebounder narrative gets considerably less straightforward once that context gets factored into the evaluation honestly.
It's time to launch a federal investigation into Angel Reese for sports gambling. Bang! You could only be this bad on purpose, right? Bang! With the recent developments of NBA players and NBA coaches being investigated by the FBI for sports gambling, is it time we take a look at Angel Reese? I think so. Bang! She told everyone, take my over and rebounds. Trust me, I grabbed my own misses. Bang! It really makes you think, was she throwing games? They finished last in the conference. Bang!
For proper context, the Chicago Sky won a championship a relatively short time before Reese joined the roster. This was not a franchise already in structural freefall that happened to have her name attached to the decline through circumstance rather than connection. The organization had demonstrated the capacity to compete at the highest level within recent memory. The deterioration happened with her on the roster, and the trajectory moved in the wrong direction across both seasons she was present rather than improving toward the level the pre-existing organizational foundation suggested was achievable. 2 All-Star selections, 0 playoff appearances, a win total that shrank year over year rather than growing towards something meaningful. But the on-court performance numbers are almost secondary to what was apparently happening inside the building on a daily basis, because the people who work inside that organization began going on record after the trade was finalized, and what they said was not vague or diplomatically cushioned. One insider stated directly that there had been significant apprehension between the team and Reese throughout her tenure, and that everyone inside the organization was relieved they no longer had to manage her various controversies as part of their daily professional reality. That is a person with direct organizational knowledge choosing to attach their professional credibility to that statement for public attribution. Teammates and coaching staff reportedly spent substantial portions of 2 seasons operating in an environment defined by tension and careful navigation around a situation that never fully stabilized, regardless of what interventions were attempted internally.
Angel Reese traded to the Atlanta Dream, as you guys know. Jeff Pagliocca couldn't wait to send her package. See ya. In fact, reports are coming out that Jeff Pagliocca was so excited about sending Angel Reese to Atlanta, he personally packed her bags.
The suspension that Chicago eventually handed down represented the point at which the organization formally acknowledged what had been building internally for a considerable period of time. Suspensions in professional sports do not materialize from isolated incidents or single moments of poor judgment that cross a line briefly and then pull back. They come after an extended stretch of the organization absorbing something through quieter and less visible channels until the capacity for continued absorption runs out completely. The conversations that were supposed to recalibrate the dynamic. The warnings that were supposed to establish that consequences were real and enforceable. The internal processes that were supposed to address the underlying issues before they produced damage visible enough to require formal documentation. All of that preceded the suspension, and none of it produced the correction the organization needed to see. And following the suspension, Reese reportedly missed the remaining games on the schedule while citing a back injury as the reason for her absence. Sources inside the organization claimed she was spotted on a private jet during the same period she was listed as unavailable due to physical limitations. The credibility question that creates is one the official explanation was never adequately able to resolve. All of that history is the essential backdrop required to fully understand what happened when her new Atlanta teammates stepped to the microphone at that welcome press conference. But before getting there, the specific ways Reese handled her relationships with individual teammates in Chicago deserve their own honest examination, because the pattern that emerges is what makes everything that followed feel inevitable rather than surprising.
Angel comes in. Oh, wait, you're not usually here in these meetings. Oh, not thinking much of it. Wait, you're not usually here in these meetings. Angel Reese is like, wait, what's going on here? Jeff Pagliocca, sit down, Angel. We don't want you on the team anymore. But we'll give you a couple choices. You let us know a few choices of where we'll send you, and just let us know. Angel Reese said, ooh.
Courtney Vanderloot represents the most revealing individual example of how Reese's approach to teammates damaged the environment inside that building in ways that extended beyond general friction. Vanderloot is a WNBA veteran whose reputation within the league was built through years of sustained excellence, championship contributions, and the kind of consistent professionalism that earns genuine respect from everyone who shares a locker room with her. She is exactly the type of player that teammates organize themselves around and run through walls for when the competitive situation demands it. While Vanderloot was dealing with an injury, Reese went on record describing her in terms that amounted to calling her old and past her competitive prime. Not in a private conversation that stayed contained, not in an off-the-cuff comment caught by a microphone that was not supposed to be active, publicly enough and loudly enough that Vanderloot herself was eventually required to sit down on camera and formally respond to what her own teammate had said about her while she was injured, and unable to respond through her performance. Process what that specific dynamic actually means inside a professional environment. A player is sidelined by injury, already the most vulnerable position any competitor can occupy. and her teammate publicly undermines her credibility in a way that forces her to defend herself through a media appearance. That is not competitive edge or unfiltered honesty about roster construction. It landed in that locker room exactly the way you would expect it to land, and the reverberations from it did not disappear quickly. And Reese did not stop there. She told reporters publicly that she was not settling for the same outcomes and that acquiring great players was a non-negotiable requirement from her perspective. Wanting to win is a universal professional ambition that deserves no criticism on its own. Saying it through a public media platform while your current teammates are still inside the building preparing for their next game is a specific and deliberate form of disrespect that the front office cataloged, the locker room absorbed, and the subsequent apology did not fully neutralize regardless of how sincerely it was offered.
We can't rely on Courtney to come back at that age that she's at, Reese said. I know she'll be a great asset for us, but we can't rely on that. We need someone probably a little younger with some experience, somebody who's been playing the game and is willing to compete for a championship and has done it before. Courtney Vandersloot, by the way, 2-time WNBA champion, 5-time All-Star, 2-time All-WNBA first team, left the New York Liberty, a championship caliber team, to come help out the Chicago. Oh, damn. Oh, damn. Oh, dang. Oh, dang. Yes,
Mila Cardoso was positioned by the Chicago organization as the player Reese would build her professional legacy alongside. The front court partnership between them was supposed to be the foundation that the franchise's competitive future was constructed around. Two young players growing together inside the same system, developing complementary skills, and eventually becoming the kind of interior duo that opposing coaches have to specifically game plan around. Instead, the relationship reportedly deteriorated, to a point where Cardoso's body language during games communicated to anyone watching carefully that she had mentally separated herself from the situation around her. One insider described the dynamic after the trade was completed by noting that Cardoso could now operate freely without Reese present, which is a direct and unambiguous way of saying that Reese's presence was functioning as a limitation on her own front court partner's ability to perform, rather than as an elevating force that made everyone around her better.
Unless there are extenuating circumstances, and the circumstances have got to be major, teams do not trade superstar players because they're outspoken. Teams do not send away their cash cow because they're difficult to work with.
Then there is the injury situation, and this specific accusation carries particular weight because of where it originated. Reports of Reese faking a physical injury to avoid suiting up for the team's remaining games did not come from outside critics or rival fan communities searching for ammunition. They came from people inside the Chicago organization who had been observing the situation closely enough and for long enough to describe it as a pattern rather than an isolated incident. When accusations of that nature come from inside your own building, from people with direct knowledge of your daily professional behavior, they carry a fundamentally different evidentiary weight than anything circulating through external channels. That is the complete picture of what Atlanta inherited when they finalized this trade. And it is the essential context for understanding why what her new teammates said at that welcome press conference landed the way it did. Because sometimes the people closest to a situation say the most honest things in the moments when the cameras are still rolling and the official script has not yet fully taken over. Hoopzonic will be watching how this Atlanta chapter develops from the very first day of training camp. Drop your prediction below. Does Reese prove everyone wrong in Atlanta, or does the pattern follow her to a new city the way it has everywhere else? Now here's where everything comes together, because when a player walks into a new locker room carrying this kind of history, people are already forming opinions before a single game is played. That welcome press conference wasn't just a formality, it was the first real glimpse into how her new teammates might be viewing her, and the energy reportedly felt off from the start. You could sense hesitation, the kind that doesn't come from strangers, but from players who've already heard the stories, seen the headlines, and maybe even talked to people who were there before. That matters more than any stat line ever. Will chemistry isn't something you can fake in professional sports. It shows up in the small moments, in communication on the court, in trust during tight games, and in whether teammates genuinely want to see each other succeed. And right now, the biggest question surrounding Reese isn't about her ability to rebound or put up numbers. It's about whether she can rebuild that trust in a completely new environment. Because if the same patterns follow her to Atlanta, it won't matter how talented she is individually. Teams don't win championships when the locker room feels divided. At the same time, this is also an opportunity. A fresh start can reset everything if the player is willing to adjust, listen, and grow. Atlanta didn't make this move by accident. They clearly see potential, and they're betting that a change of scenery might bring out a different version of her. But that only works if the effort to change is real and consistent. Otherwise, the same issues that followed her out of Chicago could show up again, just in a different jersey. So now it comes down to this. Was Chicago the problem, or was it a preview of what Atlanta is about to deal with? We're going to find out soon enough. But what do you think? Is this a fresh start that turns everything around, or is Atlanta walking into the same situation Chicago just walked away from? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below.